Hello and welcome to the Care It Out Sleep Show, a podcast for tired parents who are searching for a bit more sleep the caring way. I'm your host, Kerry Secker, infant sleep consultant, founder of my unique sleep approach, Care It Out, and your caring sleep supporter. I really hope you'll join me on my mission to get Smalls a settled night's sleep without the tears, training or techniques. I love talking about sleep and I can't wait to share my sleep subjects with you. My approach to getting you more sleep is simple, straightforward, but above all, it's got to make sense and feel best for you. Ready to get more sleep? Then let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Care It Out Sleep Show. This is your host, Kerry Secker, and I really hope you're well. And as always, my intention behind every episode of the podcast I put out is that you find it useful, you find it reassuring. I'm all about the reassurance here, but also you find some really sensible and actionable steps that you can put in place to help with whatever is going on with you and your small sleep. And today's episode, it's been a long time coming. It's by popular demand, as the last one, is my early rising episode. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking all about early rising. And if you are experiencing early rising, which is chances are if you're listening to this, it might be going on, I just want to reassure you that you are definitely not alone. Your small isn't broken, and chances are there are some things that we can have a look at to help move you forward. I see early rising in my practice pretty much every week. Somebody will email me multiple times about an early wake. Questions on my weekly live on Instagram, this comes up all the time. Early wake ups, it's a popular one. Early wake up is definitely a popular one. And I also had so many messages from you from on the back of the podcast asking for an early rising episode. So here we are. I thought today is the perfect day to record it. So what I'm going to do is, as always, I try and split it into sections. What I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm just going to quickly run through what do I class as an early wake up, why early wake ups can be ever so slightly tricky to move forward from, and then I'm going to look at how I try and prevent that wake up rather than getting them back to sleep. And then what I'm going to do is go through the 5 areas that I look at in practice if a family that I'm having a call with has an early rise. Doesn't make sense. So let's start right at the beginning. What do I class as an early wake? Now, actually, this ties in nicely with what I've been talking about this week about realistic sleep expectations. And sometimes it is just a shift of our expectations that is all that's needed. So there is a lot of expectation out there that every baby, toddler, child all of us are going to wake up at 7 a.m. in the morning, and that is the dream scenario. And the reality is often very different from the expectation. And yes, so I like the some but not all rule, and for some smalls, waking up at 7 a.m, that is where they're at, that's what they need, they're happy waking up there. But I'm also very much like to be very honest and keep things real here, and you might not want to hear this listening to an early wake up episode, but some babies, just smalls, toddlers, that's why I use the word small, I'm just going to stick with small. Some smalls just find it really, really tricky to get to 7 a.m. They're just not made to wake that late. So I class early wake anything before 6 a.m. is an early wake up, and I would treat that as a night wake up. But 6 a.m. it is early. It is a bit of a ball buster, but I always try and get you to at least 6 a.m. because I think that's it's early, but it's a civilised time to start your day. Anything before that with a 5 in it, just from a mindset, I think can have such an impact on your well-being for the day, and both you and your small's energy levels. And I honestly believe the only reason why we should be starting our day at 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning, which you might laugh when I say that, but I have worked with plenty of families that are starting their day at 3 or 4. I probably get a couple of months. The only reason why we need to be up at that time is if we're going on holiday or we are coming back from a really good night out. It's been a while since I've done one of those. But all jokes aside, I just wanted to also reassure you, because again, all about reassurance here, that Early wake ups, even if your small is not having any wake ups during the night, I don't believe anybody has the monopoly on tiredness, and I'm probably going to get shot down for this, but I'm going to be honest about it, because simply it feels different for everybody. I've learned that over the 20 years of working with families, you're all so different, and what is sustainable and realistic for one just might not be realistic and sustainable for another. So early rising, yes, it may be that one wake up the night, waking early, but it can still have a massive impact on everybody's well-being. And I do think it is tough and tiring waking up. Well, parenting is tough and tiring regardless, I think, but also even on its own, it's tough and tiring. Even with multiple wake-ups during the night, it's tough and tiring. So I think a lot of well, I've definitely seen lots of things out there that really belittle early wake up in the they really, let me start again, I've seen some stuff out there that really belittles wake up. I'm going to start again. I lost my train of this because I'm so excited. I've seen lots of stuff out there that really belittles waking up early in the morning, and that it's just something that you need to deal with, or it can't have that much of an impact. And I am all about listening to you and meeting you where you're at. So I just wanted to reassure you there. I'm sorry, I've put my teeth in now. I think I'll be all right for the rest of the episode. So yeah. What do I class as an early wake? Basically, anything pre 6 a.m. I would class as an early wake. And that is because not every baby is able to sleep, or every small is able to get to 7 a.m. I think that's really important. But also some babies are just early risers. And sometimes we do have to be realistic within it. And then just want to go through why early wake-ups can be slightly tricky to move forward from. And to go through this, we just need to go through a little bit of science. As the night goes on, the melatonin, the sleep hormone, starts to decrease. And from 3 a.m. onwards, there's very little melatonin in your small system. The melatonin is very low. And they've got all their wake-up hormones trying to tell them that their body that it's nearly time to wake up. You've got all the, not so much in winter, but in summer, if you're listening to this in summer, you have got all the outside birds singing. It's light. That can definitely help get our circadian rhythm going and wake us up. And because of all of these things, the pressure to sleep, aka the peak pressure, can be very, very low. And this can have a real impact on your small sleep, because when they wake up at that time of the morning past 3 a.m, well, one is that it's natural and normal for them to move around a little bit more. You might notice that they look really unsettled for the whole of that period. That's completely normal. It's normal that they might wake up a little bit more frequently, but that at the back end of the night, again, that's very normal. But sometimes what can happen is that if they do wake up, they can find it very difficult to get back to sleep because of all those things. So that's why I'm not saying it's impossible, because it isn't, but it can be tricky to move forward from an early rise because we don't have their biology on side. And the other reason why is that some babies, you might not want me to say this, or you might not want to hear this, but I will always be completely honest and upfront with you, because one, I think you deserve it. Two, I'm a really honest and upfront person. Is that some smalls, with the best will in the world, you could pull out all the sleep tricks, all the sleep suggestions, and they would still wake up early. They are just naturally early risers, and whatever you're doing doesn't move you forward. And actually sometimes surrendering to that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with looking and putting strategies in place and looking at some very caring sleep suggestions to put in place to help. But sometimes for some families, surrendering to the early rise and then looking at strategies to cope with, or not necessarily coping, but looking at strategies that help you cope better with your sleep, and actually what you're doing in your day can be less frustrating than trying to fix a small where they just will not, whatever you're doing isn't seeing a later start to the day. And the best way to tell whether you've got, I call them an early riser or an early waker. And the slight difference, an early riser will be up, happy, raring to go even after a short amount. They might be tired when they wake up, but quite often or not, they're ready to go. They make it to their first nap without too much of a meltdown. They're not limping towards that first nap of the day. They can make it through the morning or to their first nap. Where an early waker, you might find that they wake up, they clearly look as if they need to go back to sleep. They might be unsettled, rubbing eyes, they're not very happy all morning, you're limping towards that first nap, or they're limping all through the morning, and they look as if they want to go back to sleep. It's quite obvious that they want to get back to sleep. They weren't ready. They've woken up, but they weren't ready to wake up. Where an early riser is somebody that is just ready to wake up and can make it to the next nap. So the first thing I would always suggest parents do, or the first thing I always encourage you to do, is to work out or just have a think about whether your baby is an early riser and is happy, got lots of energy, doesn't look particularly tired, can make it to their first nap if they're having a nap and they're not limping through the morning, or an early waker when it's very obvious that they don't want to be awake, they could do with more sleep, and the morning's a little bit of a limp. That in itself can be helpful. And again, if you're sitting here thinking, or you're listening to this, whether you're sitting or standing, whether you're listening to this and thinking, I'm not quite sure which one mine is, or you're quite clear, it's clear that your baby is an early riser, I still think if it isn't working for you, it's always okay to make a tweak around something and just to see what happens. But yeah, I thought that would be really interesting to go through. Early riser, an early riser or an early waker, which one is your small? However, having said all of that, when it comes to moving forward from an early wake up, it's not impossible, but my whole approach is I would try and rather prevent your small from waking up at that time of the morning, needing support or up for the day, rather than them waking up and you getting them back to sleep. This is a massive part of my approach. My whole approach is always about setting up the naps, the bedtime routine, the settled night sleep. So it probably comes as no surprise if you've listened to all the episodes that it isn't about getting them back to sleep when they wake up. And the reason why I do this, it just doesn't make any sense. I am a path of least resistance person, especially when it comes to you and your sleep. I will always, not lazy, I think it's very smart. I'm always trying to get you where you would like to be, with the minimum amount of fuss and the minimum amount of disturbance to you, your small, their sleep, and your whole family. So the reason why is when they wake up, it's very difficult to get them back to sleep because of all those things I've just gone through. Melatonin is low, almost undetectable. The peak pressure is low because of the melatonin. Some smalls are early risers, and you've got, if it's summer, it's light, bird singing. You've got all the cues that it's time to wake up in the morning. So my whole approach is I would try and rather very slowly extend the time that they're waking up, rather than having strategies in place that try and get them back to sleep. Of course, I honestly feel that there is no right or wrong. I will stand by that to the end of days for me. There is no right or wrong. And if you are looking to do something like something where they wake up and you're trying to get them back to sleep, and that's working for you, like a dramatic morning where you stay in the bedroom and it's dark until it's an acceptable time to get out, and then go out, say good morning and open up the curtains. If you feel that that's working, that's going to work for you, it's definitely worth a shot. Wake to sleep, grow clocks, there's nothing wrong with these things. It's just not something I've ever suggested on practice. Unlikely to be honest, but you never know. But what I do look is at 5 areas to help you get the best chances to move forward from an early rise. And what I'm going to do now is go through the 5 of these for you. So let's start with, I was going to do a little recap. Maybe I'll just do a very quick recap and then I'll go on to the 5 reasons. So what do we class? I class an early wake anything pre 6 a.m. The reasons why it can be difficult to move forward from an early wake is because some of your smalls might be early risers, and that's very tricky to move forward from. Melatonin, low peak pressure, and it's about getting them back. It's not about getting them back to sleep, it's about preventing it. The first thing I would encourage you to do is try to figure out whether your small is a early riser or an early waker. Early riser, basically rising early, ready to go, can keep going to their nap. an early waker is likely to look as if they didn't want to be awake, might want to go back to sleep, look tired all morning, limping till their first nap of the day or lunchtime. And my whole approach is we're going to set up the wake up time. So fingers crossed, some of the suggestions I go through mean that your small wake up time slowly gets later and later, rather than them waking up and trying to get us back to sleep. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through 5 things that I look at in practice to help move you forward. And I'm going to crack onto these now. I love doing a summary. I think that's how I learn. So I thought that was really important that I just go through that. Right, I'm going to whiz through these now. The first thing I look at, number 1, is are they overtired? Now this is overtiredness. I know lots of people talk about this a lot, myself included, and this is always the first thing I would probably look at. Yes, it can be overdiagnosed. It's not always overtiredness, and it isn't always this simple. But if they are overtired, then doing some of these things that I'm going to go through, they're often it's a very small change that you're going to do to see a big change to their sleep. So I always check this first just to overrule it, because if it's going to work, it's going to work. It's simple, it's going to work very quickly, and you wouldn't need to look at the other things that I'm going to go through. But again, always like to be honest and upfront. It is not not every baby that is waking up early is overtired. There are other things to look at, but this is the thing that I check first. And the reason why it seems so illogical, doesn't it, that if your baby is waking up early, that they are going to putting them to bed earlier just means that they're going to wake earlier and earlier. But sometimes what happens is when they're overtired, they produce that, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this before, cortisol, aka baby Red Bull. And if they go to bed a little bit overtired, when that melatonin levels start to decrease from 3 a.m. onwards, but really from 4 or 5 a.m. onwards, very undetectable traces of melatonin, if there's cortisol there, it overrides that, and they can find themselves awake or very difficult to get back to sleep. Restless, might need your support to get back to sleep, might actually be up to start the day. So yeah, sounds crazy, sounds really silly, but bringing bedtime a little bit earlier can actually help with them waking later in the morning. Now, so the most simple thing is if we're checking for overtiredness is just to bring bedtime slightly earlier. Now, I wouldn't suggest going too crazy, because especially when there's an early rise going on already, I want to try and avoid pulling bedtime really super early, meaning that they are waking even earlier, because that is a possibility. But what I would suggest you do, if this is resonating with you, they seem a little bit unsettled in their bedtime routine, they're taking quite a long time to go down at bedtime, they're bed begging in the bedtime routine, like very, very unsettled, bringing bedtime at just a tiny little bit earlier can make a really, really big difference. And my suggestion would be to go really super slowly. My whole approach, tiny tweaks over time. Just bring it slightly earlier by 10-15 minutes and see if that makes a difference. If they start, it will take time. I don't believe I call it Amazon Prime patience. We do something once and that's it. I don't believe baby sleep needs fixing, but it's fixed once and for all. It might take anywhere between 3 to 7 nights of doing that in a row to see a difference. So it'd be worth it. But if you see that time that they start, your small starts waking earlier, I would park it. But number 1, I would be asking myself, are they overtired? And if that resonates with you, I would be bringing their bedtime slightly earlier by 10-15 minutes to see if that makes a difference. Number 2 is, the second thing I look at is their bedtime too early? Yeah, I know, I'm going round in circles here. Getting to settle night, well, actually, babies, it's a balance. Everything is a balance with a baby. And sometimes if your little one is going to sleep too early, what can happen is that can also mean that they have slept a really good night's sleep. They're up early, they've used up all the hours in their bed bank. I'm going to explain about that in a second, and then they can't get back to sleep. So coming back to the bed bank, I have this theory called a bed bank, and a bed bank is simply how much your small needs to sleep in a 24-hour period. Now, if they are napping, the bed bank then splits into 2, their nap needs and their night needs. And like most things on my approach, I don't believe that there's a one size all fit bed bank that by X age, every baby needs X amount of sleep. Again, massive expectation here. And this is because your small is completely different, and how much sleep we need is very individual. And I do believe that some babies need, I know, again, no, you probably don't want to hear this, but some babies do have lower sleep needs than others, and some do need more sleep than others. And again, I'm always looking, for me, it will always come back down to what's going on for you and what's going on for your small. So for some smalls, if they're rising early in the morning, it could be that they're going to bed early, a reasonable time for them, but it's too early for them. They use up all their hours in the bed bank, and then if they've used up all their hours in the bed bank by 5:30 a.m, they're going to be up and ready to start the day. Basically, they've had enough sleep. They've met their night needs for the need. So if this is resonating with you, and sometimes it is really tricky because overtiredness and undertiredness or bedtime too early, they can mimic, they look exactly the same thing. So I'm not an expert. I don't know all there is to know and know all the answers, but I even sometimes find it very tricky to differentiate between the two, and sometimes it is a little bit of trial and error to find out which one it is, which is why I always suggest checking, are they overtired first, especially if there's signs that they're tired at bedtime. And if they're not, it's always worth, the second thing I'd be looking at is their bedtime too early. If their bedtime is too early, signs that would point to this is they're fine, they're happy in their bedtime routine, they're going to sleep within 15 to 30 minutes after their bedtime routine, they're happy-ish going to sleep, they're going to sleep without too much bother. And this would be, you would more likely to see this with an early riser, like they would wake up, they would be signs that they're an early riser again, that they're raring to go, they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, they want to get straight on with their day, all those things that you probably don't want to do at 5 a.m. They're ready, they want to play with the Play-Doh, they want to read books, they are ready to go, and they're good to go until they have their nap, if they're having a nap, or bedtime. So if this is resonating with you, it could be that bedtime is too early. And again, my suggestion would be, it's the opposite of overtiredness. My suggestion would be to very slowly, tiny tweaks over time, to nudge their bedtime a little bit later. And again, I wouldn't go crazy. I wouldn't go forward by an hour, because that's a lot. I would do it very, very slowly. First of all, I would just get curious, push their bedtime up by 10-15 minutes, see what happens to their wake up time. And again, it's very rare that there is an instantaneous fix. Amazon Prime again, it can take a while of doing the later bedtime for 7 to 10 days to kick in. I actually find that, I've said 7 to 10 days on this one because overtiredness tends to be quicker, but I've noticed that it's sometimes it does take a little bit longer if it's overtiredness to push everything later. And also there isn't a quick fix, so push it later. If that is resonating with you and we feel the bedtime is too early, push their bedtime later by 10-15 minutes. Stick with that for 2 or 3 days. Notice what's happening to their wake up time. Might take some time, 7 to 10 days, before you start noticing a difference. It might be straight away. Every small is completely different. And hopefully, if you start to see a later wake up time, then once they've adjusted to that later bedtime, you can push it again until you get to your ideal wake up time in the morning. And again, I can't stress this enough. These are not shoulds, these are sleep suggestions. And if you push their bedtime later and it has an impact on their bedtime, how they behave in the bedtime routine, how they're settling to sleep, it starts to impact their night wake ups. There's a change to those, and I'm not talking about for the better, they change for the worse, or they start waking up even earlier, then I would definitely park bringing bedtime later. Third thing I look at, number 3, is, are they actually asking for support? Now, 2 things I look at night time that's really important is, one, that we are respecting their sleep space. That if it's natural for them to move around a lot at night time. Nobody just, well, it's very rare that one of us will get into bed at bedtime, stay in that exact position. You as an adult have experience of, well, I know I certainly do, move all around the bed, move my pillow around, all that jazz. So it's completely normal that they move, moan, groan, call out, chat. Some might even cry very briefly as they're stitching their sleep cycles together. Can scare the living daylights out of us, but it is completely normal. But my suggestion would be that it is normal that they're moving around at night time, but we want to make sure that we're respecting that space. And if they're not crying, they're not emotionally uneasy, they're not asking for support, my suggestion would be to always respect the sleep space that they're asking for. So that's one thing with it. At night time, we're respecting their sleep space. And then the other thing is, within that, again, it's about balance, is that we are meeting their needs if they ask for it. So if they're crying, emotionally uneasy, on my approach, we always go to them. I don't believe that's a bad habit, spoiling them. It's going to reinforce that responding to them reinforces what's happening. I really don't buy into that at all. So coming back to, are they asking for support? This is especially important past midnight, but especially past 3 a.m. and in the early hours of the morning, because as I went through before, past 3 a.m. no melatonin, sleep hormone is at its absolute lowest. There's hardly any peak pressure, wake up hormones raging around the body to wake us up. So it's completely normal that past midnight, but past 3 a.m, I call it the 3 a.m. fidgets, that you might notice that your little one move, moan, groan, call out, chat, just move around so much more. And my whole approach is, if they are genuinely asking for support, or you want to go to your small, or you instinctively need to get to them, then you must always go to them. But if they are, there's a big difference. Just because they're awake at night time and moving around, it doesn't always mean that they're asking for support. And I think this is really, really, really important in the back end of in the early hours of the morning. I don't believe parents you're doing anything wrong or making mistakes, but quite often it just, again, it's very logical, isn't it? If I get in there straight away and get them back to sleep, then it's really going to help. And in some cases, sometimes I do suggest that, getting in there straight away. But again, to begin with, my suggestion would be to really make sure, are they asking for support? And just a reminder that they might be awake, eyes wide open, cock cruising, cock crawling, moving around the bed. If they're not crying, they're not asking for support. And if they're not asking for support, I would respect the sleep space they're asking for and give them that chance to stitch their sleep cycle together. And this is especially important past 3 a.m. for the 3 a.m. fidgets, but also it can take a little bit longer for them to stitch their sleep cycle together as their sleep pressure gets lighter. And the other thing is as soon as you're in there, especially, this is important at any time of the night, as soon as you go in there and they see you, they're just, oh, mummy, daddy's here. Must be time to get up because you're there. And especially in the first part, like 3 a.m. onwards, if we go in there and sleep is lighter and they see you, it is very difficult then to get them back to sleep where they're at with their biology of the sleep. So I hope that makes sense. So my sleep suggestion number 3 is always ask yourself, are they asking for support? If they're not asking for support, not crying, emotionally easy, my suggestion would be, it's not about leaving them, it's not about not responding, it's not about ignoring them. I would never ignore a baby or a toddler small that needed support. It's just about making sure that they are genuinely asking for support before going in there, because once they see us at that time of the morning, it can be very difficult to get out. Number 4, this is mainly for older ones, but it can be very applicable to younger ones as well. And the 4th thing I look at, number 4, is, are they getting too much nap during the day? And when I'm talking about this, it's rare that it would be a baby that was on 2 naps, but it can definitely happen. But this comes back to the bed bank that I was just talking about earlier on in the show. So the bed bank, just a quick recap on the bed bank, how much sleep we need in a 24-hour period. And if your little one is napping, that the bed bank is then split into nap needs and night needs. And for some little ones, there is a balance. It is all linked. Everything is linked with, everything is linked for your small. So food, diet, going to the toilet, pooping, digestive system, sleep behaviour. You might have noticed that if one of those gets knocked off, it has a domino impact on everything else, and it can have an impact on, or you might notice a change in other areas. And it's definitely the same within sleep. Everything is linked. So your naps lead into your nights can lead back into the naps. First nap, wake up time, nap, bedtime routine, what we're doing at bedtime. But say we're focusing on are they getting too much nap? And for some babies, if they are having lots of nap during the day, that can then have an impact on how much sleep they need at night time. So their nap needs can eat into their night needs, so to speak. And sometimes getting to balancing out that early rise, it can be a real chicken and egg situation, because it's like what came first sometimes. Having loads of an early rise, needing loads of having lots of naps during the day, or lots of nap hours during the day, going to bed, up early again. So my suggestion would be, if you've tried everything else, or a bed bell starts ringing and this really resonates with you, especially with older ones, especially as they're going past 2, it might be worth thinking about, are they getting too much nap during the day? Again, I don't buy into this one size by X amount. By X age, they should be sleeping X amount of sleep. I don't really buy into that. It's because they are all really different. Younger ones, it is really tricky. I'm really probably not talking under 6 months here, but 6 months to 12 years, if they are getting any more than 3 to 4 hours nap a day, I might be thinking they're getting a bit too much nap during the day. And from like 18 months, around 18 months to 2 years, what can happen is that nap needs change really drastically at this age. It can be hard to keep up, and they're all really different. So some toddlers really need that 2-hour nap during the day in order to get to bedtime, and just for their well-being. That's just their sleep needs. Where some babies, or some toddlers, it's a toddler at this age, some toddlers at this age, they really don't need the full 2 hours, and it can really start to impact on bedtime and waking up early. So yeah, it's definitely worth addressing. Number 4, are they getting too much nap during the day? This is definitely something I look at. Signs that they might be getting, 'cause it's always handy to have signs, isn't it? Signs that they might be getting too much nap during the day. They might battle going to bed purely because they're just not tired enough to get to sleep. Again, this would be more likely with early riser, where they are an early riser. They're ready to wake up and start their day, and they can make it through. And the other thing with the too much nap would be it's really difficult, because I think I had to do it out of context. But usually if it is something like too much nap, as soon as I say that to a parent, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So if that's really resonating with you, I would be looking at that nap as well, how much nap they're getting. And then the last thing I just want to mention about naps, and it comes back to that chicken and egg situation. Sometimes what happens is that they wake up early, and then that first nap of the day, if they're not having a first nap, is pulled really early, and then everything kind of just stacks on from there. So one sleep suggestion that I talk about a lot is just making sure that first nap isn't any earlier than 8 a.m. regardless of the time they woke up, if you can. And again, if that feels like too much of a stretch, I would knock it out a little bit, because again, that can really help reinforce napping too early can really enforce that early wake up again, because they wake up early, they nap really early. Like I've worked with some smalls where they're going down for their first nap at like 7:30. Then their whole day is just shunted earlier. Where if we're going to stretch out a nap gap, which sometimes feels really scary, but sometimes I do look at that, doing that for the first nap of the day it feels scary, but it's better to do it for that one than the ones that follow on from there. So that's a bed bonus there to just bear in mind. And if that feels massive, like if your little one is having a first nap at like 6:30 a.m, my suggestion would be to break it down a little bit more. Maybe have 7 a.m at the earliest for 3 or 4 days, then 7:30, then 8 a.m. Don't feel you've got to do it all in one chunk. And then the very last thing I look at, and I have saved this for last because it is the very, very last thing I look at, is do they have support at bedtime? Are they helped to sleep? Now, I want to preface this with 2 things. One, I do not believe that you need to get your small to fall asleep independently to get to a settled night's sleep or look at an early rise, which was why I really wanted to leave this to last. And the other one is that I don't believe that supporting your small to sleep... Sorry, I thought somebody had crashed through my window and it was really loud if you heard that. But yeah, coming back to do they have support at bedtime, I don't believe that you need to, like, supporting them to fall asleep independently is the be end and end all of a settled night's sleep and moving forward from an early rise. And I don't believe that how your small goes to sleep, supporting them at night time to get to sleep, it's not a bad habit, it's not a rod for your own back, and we don't need to change that unless we want to. But I felt that I did need to include this because sometimes it is rare, this is why I've left it till last, how your small goes to sleep at bedtime can impact the wake up in the morning. However, and the reason for this is, let me actually go back a step. The reason for this is that I'm going to try and keep this to a brief summary because I do like to waffle sometimes, comes back to that melatonin sleep hormone in the early hours of the morning. So for some, it's definitely not all. I have worked with hundreds, absolutely hundreds of babies that are fed, rocked, cuddled to sleep. You sit in the room with them and they sleep very well at night time. They're at their biological best, everything's working, there's no early rise. However, for some, and it is incredibly rare that this happens, how they go to sleep causes an early wake up, because what happens is they wake up, at the back end of the night, they realise that there is a change from how they went to bed at bedtime, and then they need to have whatever happens at bedtime, their bedtime boundary, to keep them asleep, if that makes sense. And if they can't, because of the where the sleep hormones are, the outside light, bird noise, cortisol ready to get them up for the day, if they wake up, they can be very difficult to get back to sleep because their bedtime boundary stops working altogether. So signs that it could be a bedtime boundary, I leave it for last for all of those reasons. It is incredibly rare that I would change how... In fact, I haven't done it. I'm thinking in my head, I haven't done it. I definitely haven't done it this year. So that's how incredibly rare it is. I very rarely would look at a bedtime boundary to move forward from an early rise. The only time I would probably do that is if I checked all the other 4 things. Are they overtired? Is bedtime too early? Are they actually asking for support? Are they getting too much nap during the day? But if we've checked all of those and it just wasn't working for the parents, it wasn't working for the baby, then I might look at this. But I would always preface it with those 2 things, and also that we might change the bedtime boundary, but it might not change the wake up time. Again, always fully honest about that. If you wanted to change, signs that it could be the bedtime boundary is you're more likely to notice that they would wake up frequently during the night and need help to stitch their sleep cycles together. It would be very rare that they would get to 3-4 a.m. and then they would start their day because of the bedtime boundary. Or you might notice that you need to constantly keep them on you in order to, or constantly give them how they got to sleep at bedtime at the back end of the night to keep them asleep. So you'd have to keep feeding, keep rocking, or keep cuddling. And if you stop those, they would wake. Then it might be worth having a look at what happens at bedtime boundary. Moving forward from a bedtime boundary, I could not do it justice in one podcast episode. And if you have done all the others, all the other things, all the other 4 sleep suggestions, and it really hasn't moved forward, and you feel that, again, your instinct, guts are always good. I've always followed my instinct, and it's probably always been right. The times I found myself in hot doo-doo are the times that I've not followed my instinct, or something's resonated with me. So chances are, if it was the bedtime boundary, that bed bell again would be ringing. Do you know what? I really think it is that. And then perhaps you could want to look at it. But if not, I would probably leave it well alone. If you did want to move forward from some very caring ways of moving forward from a bedtime boundary. I go through all of these in my bedtime boundary e-course for you. There's so many different ways we get our babies to sleep. There's no right or wrong, and it would take me, it's a good 2-3 hour course. It would take me a while to go through it, but that would be a starting point. But as I said, last chance sleep saloon there with that. And then lastly, I also just want to talk about I can't talk about early rise without talking about blackout blinds. I'm not one for loads of parenting products, mainly because I don't feel that there are many things that are super helpful you genuinely need to parent. But actually blackout blinds could be your best friend if you've got a particularly light house, big windows, the sun, you are east, my geography is so bad, facing east, your small's bedroom faces east, might be worth looking at blackout blinds first as well, because they can be a game changer. They really help me with my husband. He is terrible. As soon as it gets light outside, it's literally like a switch. He's awake. But blackout blinds really helped me. So it's always worth mentioning. I probably wouldn't go really super expensive, just in case it wasn't those things, unless you want to, just in case it wasn't that. But the grow blinds that you stick on the wall, it might on the wall on the window, they might be worth a shot before trying everything else. And I will put the link to that. Again, this isn't an affiliate. I'll tell you if it was, but I'll put you the link to that in the show notes for you. Right, let me see if I can do a massive sleep summary of early rising. So, early rising. If your small is rising early, I promise you are not alone. Your small isn't broken. It is really common. I see it in practice. I get asked about this all the time in my Q&As. Most popular question asked on a Monday, early rising. And so many of you sent me a message to say, can you do an early rising episode, please? Early wake, anything pre 6 a.m. I class as an early wake. Some babies just aren't ready or biologically able to sleep to 7 a.m. Not everybody wakes at 7 a.m. and that's okay. Moving forward from early wakes can be slightly tricky to move forward from, because we don't have their biology on our side. Melatonin sleep levels are low. Peak pressure is very low. That drive to get to sleep is very low at this time of the morning. We've also got cortisol to wake up hormones. Cortisol is good for sometimes wake us up in the morning, and also some of your smalls will be early risers, and there's just not much we can do about that, or very limited things that we can do about that. Gosh, that sounded awful, sorry. Early riser, somebody that is up, ready to start the day, make it to their naps, doesn't appear tired. Early waker, somebody that your small might look as if they didn't want to wake up, can be very, very obvious, and they might be limping to their first nap of the day or want a really early nap. There are limited things that you can do. It's not impossible to move forward from an early rise, but there are only limited things you can do. And a great example of this is I will only ever book in a 30 or 60 minute care call. If a family came to me with, not saying that an early wake up is, this is not demeaning an early wake up at all, because I went through that it can really impact every aspect of your life really, but it is tricky to move forward, and I wouldn't offer a full sleep service if it was just the early wake up that was going on, because some are early risers and it can be very tricky. We've not got biology on our side and it can be tricky. There's only a certain few things that you can try. There's not endless possibilities. Surrendering sometimes to the early wake up. Some families find it easier to surrender to the early wake up and look at strategies to cope with what you're doing with your day and your sleep, going to bed slightly earlier. That can help lots of families, and I think it's worth mentioning that first. That it can be sometimes more frustrating trying to fix it than surrender to it. Blackout blinds, definitely worth a try if you haven't already got them. We're heading into winter now in the UK, so it's not such a big deal, but in summer that might be something to look at. That's why I left it last. And then my whole approach, it's about trying to prevent that wake up rather than your small waking up, and we're doing something to try and get them back to sleep, because that can be very tricky, frustrating for all of the things that I've just gone through. 5 areas I look at: are they overtired? Is bedtime too early? Are they asking for support? Are they getting too much nap during the day? Do they have support at bedtime? Could there be a bedtime boundary at play? As always, I really enjoyed talking about that. I love talking about sleep, and I really hope that comes across. Really hope you enjoy the podcast. Really hope you find that useful and informative. Please do let me know if it helps, whether you found it useful, and if it helps your early riser, or your early waker, should I say. Please let me know, and I will put the links to my bedtime boundary in the show notes, as well as the grow blinds, the blackout blinds. I've made a note to do that. And yeah, sending you big love and sleep solidarity. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to me, your host, Kerry Secker, on the Care It Out Sleep Show. I really hope you found the podcast reassuring, informative, and a little bit fun. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe to the show below, and I'd be so grateful if you could leave me some fabulous feedback. I always love hearing from you, and one lucky listener will win lifetime access to my Bedtime Basics e-course every single month. My next podcast episode will be out in 2 weeks' time, but if you can't wait for more of my sleep shizzle, you can find me over on Instagram at Care It Out Sleep Consultant. I update my sleep squares and speak sleep there on the daily. Big love and sleep solidarity to you all.